With Firewall Dragon taking center stage at YCS Niagara, by way of the newly pioneered Danger Dark World first turn kill, and Yoki winning the event, the term broken has become exceptionally more common when describing cards in the format. Over the years of competitive play, the term broken has found its way into both casual and competitive lingo, oftentimes used to describe a powerful card interaction. As defined by Alex Nerding on Zodiac Duelist, a broken card is a card which, either by itself or in combination with other cards, creates what is perceived to be an unfair advantage or is otherwise unreasonably advantageous. While that definition may hold true regardless of time, in the last 16 years of the TCG, the game has steadily evolved and grown more complex, and what was broken in 2006 might not be broken in 2018. That being said, just because a formerly broken card no longer carries that stigma, it's important that its power is documented, not just for the sake of preserving history, but to show how far the game has come since then. 2005 is easily one of the more recognizable years of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, containing what many believe to be the definitive version of the game in GOAT control or GOAT format. Taking a much simpler approach to contemporary Yu-Gi-Oh!, GOAT format was easy to pick up but very challenging to master, and as of writing, it's easily the most popular older format actively being played. While featuring cards that could never see legal status in 2018, such as Pot of Greed, Snatch Steal, or even Delinquent Duo, GOAT games are usually methodical and slower paced, constantly fighting wars of attrition and resource management. GOAT control was the meta at the time. However, things would soon change rapidly with the introduction of Cybernetic Revolution. True to its title, Cybernetic Revolution would revolutionize the game with the introduction of Cyber Dragon, a level 5 monster with 2100 attack that could special summon itself from the hand if a player controlled no monsters but their opponent did. Aside from the Chaos monsters of GOAT such as Chaos Sorcerer or Blackluster Soldier on the way at the beginning, monsters with over 2000 attack that could summon themselves weren't very common. Instead, they usually required a tribute summon or set up with cards such as Premature Burial or Call of the Haunted. Regardless, they required investments to call them to the field, and summoning them typically demanded a player commit to the play. That's why Cyber Dragon, a monster that was able to summon itself practically for free and tower over the majority of commonly played monsters, was game-changing. Even today, Cyber Dragon is so powerful in the context of GOAT format that it's not allowed in traditional GOAT format matches. Despite being in a format with countless forms of removal, Cyber Dragon still managed to be immensely powerful, as nearly all of its outs required the opponent to commit resources into them, while the Cyber Dragon itself was summoned for free. Furthermore, while the opponent might have been able to catch the Cyber Dragon with their lone copy of Ring of Destruction, it now meant that the player had one less threat to deal with. More importantly, however, it meant that another one of their power plays, such as a Blackluster Soldier summon, could not be met with Ring. Many viewed Cyber Dragon to be a broken card, as it was a powerful monster with practically no restrictions, and demanded immediate action, exerting fast damage on the board with little room for punishment, alongside forcing responses that otherwise be better off held. As the years passed, and the overall ceiling of the game raised, Cyber Dragon became less and less powerful, eventually serving as niche removal for machine decks thanks to Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. In 2018, while Cyber Dragon has accumulated years of support to become a dedicated rogue strategy, independently, the cards use scattered side deck play, in most cases to break extra links using Chimeratech Mega Fleet Dragon. The card most recently has been power-crept by Dino Wrestler Pankratops, however, a similarly high-leveled monster with 500 more attack, easier summoning conditions, and spot removal to boot. Once a fearsome beast and a symbol of a changing metagame, Cyber Dragon isn't half the broken monster it used to be. Fast forward to fall of 2014, and by now, Duelist Alliance has completely shaken up the metagame, ending one of the most diverse formats of all time, and establishing Burning Abyss and Shaddolls as the top dogs of the game. Following in the massive footsteps of Duelist Alliance, the new challengers also sought to mix up the format, and it contained meaningful support for over a dozen archetypes. But on the competitive front, alongside Burning Abyss and Shaddol, Qliphort entered the ring. This particular deck was significant, as it was the first competitive archetype revolving around the newly introduced pendulum summoning mechanic. Qliphort was, for all intents and purposes, a pendulum deck on training wheels, and though powerful in release, was definitely scaled back compared to later pendulum-based strategies. For starters, whenever a player had a Qliphort monster in their pendulum scale, they could only pendulum summon Qliphort monsters, and that's an effect that could not be negated. Additionally, though nearly all of the Qliphort monsters could be pendulum summoned, their attack became 1800 if they were not tribute summoned, while additionally packing effects that triggered if they were tribute summoned or used as tributes themselves. In the end, the Qliphort deck wasn't so much a pendulum deck as it was a tribute summon strategy that utilized the pendulum summoning mechanic. By nature of their design, it would also give way for the deck to play floodgates such as Skill Drain and Vanity's Emptiness with little to no drawbacks. Being a deck that ultimately revolved around tribute summoning, it was fair to assume that the deck's boss monster would line up with that strategy, and for Qliphort's, that idea culminated in the Qliphort Towers. Appropriately titled Qliphort Killer in the OCG, Towers is largely regarded as one of the first invincible competitive boss monsters, and in the coming years, many decks would follow in its footsteps. By invincible, a Qliphort Towers sported 3000 attack and lowered the attack of a special summon monster by 500. If that wasn't enough, Towers was also unaffected by spell and trap cards, along with the activated effects of monsters lower than level or rank 10. Much like how shooting Qliphort Dragon was viewed as an immortal game ender when it touched the board, Towers 2 became notorious for being impossible to clear. Towers was introduced into the game before common outs such as Kaijus or Utopia the Lightning existed, meaning unless a player specifically included cards to out it, such as Necroz of Decisive Armor, Diamond Crab King, or even Star Eater, it wasn't something that was usually going to leave the field. As it required 3 tributes to be summoned, Qliphort would practically never be able to kill the opponent the turn Towers was brought out, but it packed a final effect that forced the opponent to send a monster from their hand or their side of the field to the graveyard each turn. This constant depletion of resources, coupled with a looming pendulum summon of at least 3 monsters, usually meant that Towers typically ended the game once it was summoned. Though several Qliphort decks declined to play the card, with the introduction of Wavering Eyes, Qliphort decks revolving around summoning Towers as soon as possible became common. The card would eventually be forbidden on the November 2015 TCG Forbidden and Limited list. Towers was undoubtedly one of the most broken cards in the game in its heyday, as it demanded players to include otherwise suboptimal cards in their decks to out the card, alongside putting Qliphort matches on the clock, with that time running out once Towers was summoned. It allowed the deck to cheese out games that it was otherwise set to lose, and it set a dangerous precedent for card design going forward. Even in 2018, boss monsters with built-in protection are commonly referred to as Towers monsters among the community, cementing the card's legacy on the game. Towers rested on the Forbidden and Limited list for 2 full years before being released on the February 2018 list, returning to a completely different chapter of the game's history. In its prime, Towers was the bona fide boss monster of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, for all intents and purposes a colossal force that couldn't be stopped. In 2018, however, not only do more outs exist within the card pool, but the introduction of Link monsters, new monsters without levels or ranks, spelled the end for the former giant. As Towers was only unaffected by monster effects whose level or rank were lower than 10, any single Link monster could interact with it and bypass its otherwise impenetrable armor. Once requiring players to do backflips to out it, nowadays, Towers can fall to an underclock taker pointing to a monster with 1500 or more attack, or even a Nightmare Unicorn shuffling it back into the deck. As the final nail in the coffin, with pendulum monsters being relegated to the extra monster zone if they were coming from the extra deck, the pendulum summon mechanic became decidedly unviable for constant tribute summoning. Although this problem was somewhat rectified with a dedicated Link monster in Qliphort Genius, with its primary form of consistency, Qliphort Scout, remaining at limited status, there simply isn't a place for Qliphort Towers in the current game. Though Qliphort Towers is a relic of the past, it's hard to deny that the card represents something much greater, and is generally agreed upon as a broken and unhealthy piece of the game's history. This leads to the current broken card of the format that sparked the discussion in the first place, Firewall Dragon. Since its initial reveal, Firewall Dragon has created and promoted elaborate combos that were largely regenerate in nature, and have since evolved and grown stronger. Firewall Dragon has been raising red flags since its inception, ranging from enabling large boards that require a single card to execute, as well as a handful of consistent first-turn kills. Though the majority of its combos and even first-turn kills were niche strategies at best, the card pool has gradually become more accommodating and allowed Firewall Dragon to break its way into the mainstream by acting as a key piece in 2 currently problematic meta decks. The Goki strategy abuses Firewall Dragon to create a literal unbreakable board while ripping 4 cards out of the opponent's hand, while the Danger Dark World strategy uses it to perform a first-turn kill, looping Cannon Soldier for infinite burn damage. Firewall Dragon, along with negatively affecting formats it's seen play in, has begun leaving a blood trail of sorts. In the last year, cards such as Grinder Golem and A Assault Core, otherwise harmless cards, have been preemptively limited on the Forbidden and Limited list in the interest of preventing potentially degenerate combos before they see play in the TCG. Firewall Dragon itself has been limited as a means of stopping these combos, yet it still remains problematic even at 1 copy per deck. As Cannon Soldier is abused by Firewall Dragon, much like Grinder Golem and A Assault Core, many wonder if it too will fall if it means keeping Firewall Dragon alive. Both Cyber Dragon and Qliphort Towers were feared in their respective formats and oppressed the game in their own way, much like how Firewall Dragon is doing now. While Cyber Dragon would naturally be phased out of top-level play, Qliphort Towers required the game to evolve in its absence. Regardless of what happened, though, both cards would eventually be neutralized, and it's a feat many players wish to see repeated with Firewall Dragon, a card that only grows more powerful with an evolving card pool. While first-turn kill decks have always existed within some capacity in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the current Danger Dark World first-turn kill is achieved with staggering consistency. 3 players piloting the strategy made it to the top 32 of YCS Niagara, with one making it all the way to the finals. It's clear that the first turn kill is not only a viable strategy for tournament play, but arguably one that should be expected and countered. Cannon Soldier might be what's ultimately causing the burn damage, but it's only through Firewall Dragon that the card is able to infinitely decrease life points. Remove Firewall Dragon from the equation, and Cannon Soldier is neutralized, returning to obscurity as it's been for the last decade. Konami has the opportunity to actively restore the health of its game by removing a cancer, much like a Qliphort Towers. Will they do it? Only time will tell.